Here's the 1961 Corvette, a beautiful white paint job, beautiful gangster white walls. This has the original 283 with dual 4-barrel carburetors on it, and this luscious looking red interior. So while it's a beautiful car with nice paint, here's the problem. The back window, which is plexiglass, is completely filled full of swirls and scratches, and some pretty major scratches at that, the entire thing. And my guess is there's also swirls and scratches on the inside. You just can't tell until you clear up either one side or the other so you can really see what's going on. But something else I noticed here, maybe some of you seasoned professionals notice it. Do you see the holograms? Let me point those out. Okay, as you're looking at this, you see the scratches, but see this wispy line? And as I move across here, there's more of them, these wispy lines running up and down on this window. And what that means is somebody tried buffing this out with a wool pad or a foam pad on a rotary polisher and left holograms in that back window. Let me move by it. See them? Those are holograms. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and start by removing the hardtop, laying it upside down on a very soft blanket to protect the paint. And we're going to address the inside first and get it perfect like a piece of glass. Then we'll buff out the outside. And when we're done, it'll look better than brand new. And the products that we're going to use for this are the NSP primers. And one of the things that make these unique is there's no other abrasive technology on the market like it. They're perfectly round spheres with multiple facets for smooth, even cutting. And they excel at polishing out clear plastics, just like they excel at polishing out clear coat paints. We've moved the car outside. I just wanted to capture the holograms because usually the sun is the best way to capture holograms. See those wispy lines? Those are holograms from a rotary polisher. So we've turned the car around, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to remove this removable hardtop. Now you could do this both ways. You could polish the outside without removing it, and you could polish the outside, then remove it and do the inside. My experience is the inside has a lot less swirls and scratches, so it's easier and faster to correct. And once you get the inside perfect, it'll be a lot easier to see how many of the defects are still remaining after you start doing some sanding and polishing on the outside. After I moved it here, notice this. There's some major gouging and scratches going on along the bottom here that you got to be in the right light to see. Now when I take this top off, I've got two tables pushed together here in this very clean and very soft fuzzy blanket that I can put that hard top onto. And then this is an old toolbox I got. And I've done this a couple times, so this works out pretty good. This is heavy, so once I place it here, it'll stay here. Then I use these knee and back cushions I get off Amazon, and see that wedge? See that wedge shape there? I'm going to be able to put one of these right here to rest the front of the roof onto, and then I can take these other ones and kind of wedge them into the side, and that'll support it and keep it from rocking around as I'm sanding and buffing and polishing on this plexiglass window. And then after that, I'm going to be tackling the plexiglass window on that boat. And this is for a monster article on how to polish plexiglass, including by hand, with an orbital, with the rotary, and via sanding to turn this plexiglass window perfectly clear. Okay, so now that the hardtop has been safely removed off the Corvette, I got it placed on this soft fuzzy blanket here. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take, and I got this, it's an old toolbox I have with just my junky tools, but it's heavy. So this is going to work good for what I want to do. I'm going to tip this up until the back window is flush with the table. Then I'm going to stick this in here, and a little bit. Okay, just like that. Then I'm going to come around and I'm going to wedge this angled portion of these knee and back cushions kind of at an angle, pulling tight against that blanket, because what that's going to do is it's going to sandwich it in between what's in essence like soft rubber, which means it's going to grip it, not slide off of it. And it's also grabby on this blanket. And the reason I'm doing all this is because Well, this ain't my Corvette and this ain't my hardtop. And the last thing I want to do is be working on this and have this thing flying off the window, off the table somehow. So anyway, so now I've got this thing completely secured. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take and I'm going to clean this with the Dr. Beasley's Prep Wash, which is a waterless wash. I'm going to check it to see if it needs to be clayed. A lot of times when cars get repainted, there's overspray flying everywhere, and I've come across a lot of classic cars in my life that have overspray on the inside of the windshield, so why not the inside of the back window? And then I'm going to tape this thing off, and I'm going to go ahead and sand this down and then buff it out. So stay tuned as I keep working around this cool hardtop on a 61 Corvette. So now that I got this thing stabilized, the first thing I want to do is I just want to take and I'm going to clean this, make sure it's nice and clean. For that, I'm using the Dr. Beasley's Prep Wash. Just one thing I would mention about the Prep Wash is this is a waterless wash, but unlike most of the waterless washes on the market, it doesn't add anything. It doesn't add any ceramic, no silicone, no carnauba. It just cleans, and that's what I want because I want my tape to stick. This is also a great product while I'm here to go ahead and clean the inside of this vinyl top on the inside of the roof here. You know, if you try to do this in the car, you have to be a contortionist, but it's a good time to go ahead and clean that. So now that I got this thing cleaned, I'm going to take and do the baggie test. Okay, simple full top baggies. And some people would say, well, Mike, if you're going to buff on this or if you're going to sand this, that's very rough. A lot of little bumps on there. Why clay it? Well, the reason you want to clay it is because in this case, I'm going to be machine dry sanding. Sanding discs aren't cheap by any measure. And so instead of loading up my sanding disc with the gunk that's on this plexiglass window, just take it off with detailing clay. So this is the Dr. Beasley's medium grade. It's the purple, the medium grade clay. And again, I'm going to go back to the Prep Wash and just put this nice wet application down. And then I've already taken and kneaded this into like a pancake. Now I'm going to clay it. And one thing, you know, claying is very tactical. Like I can feel this thing grabbing all those contaminants. And then as I work them off with the clay, it begins to glide effortlessly. Anyway, it's a real quick procedure you can do. You can skip it, but I'll guarantee you what you're going to do is you're going to load up your sandpaper with all the gunk that's on there. Okay, so get this thing nice and cleaned off. And at this point here, I go ahead and I clean all the trim and the gaskets. Before this goes back on, I'll take and add a dressing to them so they're nice and protected. Also makes it release easier when you take the top on or off. Okay, then at this point here, I take my swirl finder light. This is a handheld light from Lake Country. And as I look at this, you know, it can be very hard to tell, are the swirls and the scratches on the inside or the outside? So if you look really carefully, you can actually see they're on the inside. So this thing's 1961. That makes it like 60 some years old. And just over time, people wiping this clean, and usually with towels, you know, t-shirts, diapers, back in the 60s, you know, we didn't have microfiber. It just gets scratched up over time. So you gotta remove the swirls and scratches on both sides if you want it to be clear like a piece of glass. And again, my personal preference is I just like to start with the inside, get it done, flip this thing over, do the other side. And then after I clear up both sides, if I still see some defects on the inside, I can turn this thing back over and remove them before I'm done and put the top back on the car. So next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and tape this thing up with some masking tape to protect all the gaskets around here. And then I'll go ahead and start the sanding process. So I've already taped around the upper part of the window frame. Now I'm just going to secure some, this is just some blue painter's tape down here. And there's two reasons you want to do this. One is to protect the gasket just from getting creamed over with sanding, dust, and then compound splatter and polish splatter. And it just protects it. Our products, Dr. Beasley's, won't stain this, but you still don't want to clean it up. But the other thing is you don't want to come back with a toothbrush and try to clean any splatter out of there because that could potentially put scratches back into the plexiglass. So it's just an ounce of prevention's worth a pound to cure. Tape this off, and here's a little tip. And every time you're doing stuff like this, you want to really secure that tape down because once it lifts, it'll probably never go back down again because you get all kinds of junk in there. And it just won't stick. So really do a good job of securing it as you're putting it on, and then you won't have to worry about it. Okay, we are ready to start sanding. Here's some before video footage. You can see all the swirls and scratches. So here's what I'm going to use to machine sand the plexiglass. This is the Eagle Abrasives by Kovacs. Some people call it Kovacs, some people call it Eagle Abrasives, but this is their dry sanding system. And I have the K1500 and the K3000. Now, normally I have 2000 and 2500 here, but I just got done teaching a sanding class in Chicago, and all my sanding supplies are en route. They're in a box on a UPS truck heading back this way. So I have to use what I have because I need to get this job done. So this is 1500, and then if you look right here on the box, it says speed equivalent to 2000, finish equivalent by machine 4000. So I am confident with this 3000 grit, I'll be able to refine the 1500 and get it ready to polish out. Now to do this, I'm going to use the Bauer. This is a Harbor Freight. They call it a 6-inch DA, but that's because it comes with a 6-inch backing plate. Has nothing to do with the tool. The tool is an 8mm free spinning random orbital polisher, which makes it very effective at doing machine sanding. Now here's a little technique tip I have. Because there's quite a bit of curve here, see the curve there? I'm going to use 2 interface pads on the backing plate. And what this is going to do is it's going to enable that tool to maintain sanding disc rotation as I go into the curves. I'll probably have to bump it all the way up to the 6-speed setting, but it's important to have a little bit of rotation as you're sanding. You don't want the sandpaper just kind of jiggling there, putting in random scratches. Anyway, let me go ahead and stick this camera up on my tripod and we will get busy sanding this thing down. So here we are. I've got my polisher that I'm using as a sander. A little cord over here. I'm going to put 2 interface pads on. It's important to align these so they're concentric or very uniform. I want you to notice that I have a black mark put on the backing plate. The reason for that is so it makes it easier for my eyes to monitor sanding disc rotation. Without the black marks, it becomes just a yellow blur and you can't tell if it's just vibrating or stalling out or if it's actually rotating. And you don't need a lot of rotation because then that would be grinding, but you do want a little rotation for effective sanding. Okay, so this is 1500 grit Kovacs. And again, you want to center this up so no part of the hook and loop from the Velcro is going to be touching the plastic. Could scar it as you're trying to sand it, so you want to get it very, very well centered, just like that. Now, normally when you're dry sanding, you should wear a respirator and whatever. I do that when I do this on my own, but when I make a video, I want you to be able to hear me, so I'm just going to do this without a respirator. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set the speed down, turn this thing on. I got good rotation where it's flat. But when I come up here where it's curved, it's kind of wimpy. So I'm going to bump this all the way up to the 6, push down a little bit, and man, I've got some good sanding action going on now. And one of the things I can see is I can actually see the scratches kind of get revealed by sanding over the plastic. Kind of the same way sanding reveals orange peel. Okay, and you don't want to let this thing stay in one place because you got to keep in mind you are removing material. Okay, so here you can see that's plastic powder that you've abraded off the windshield. It's everywhere on the windshield, so you want to just kind of clean this off of here. And then you want to wipe it off here and inspect and then decide if you need to make a few more passes. And about the only way I can really do this is just to kind of get down at a side, look at it. Sometimes it helps to put a swirl finder light on there. And I can still see some deeper scratches here and there. So I'm going to go over this one more time. And then I'm going to go to the 3000 grit and resand it and refine it so it's easier to buff out. Then I'm going to start taking a wool pad and rotary and pull my sanding marks out. Now, when I flip this over to the other side and perfect it, if I find scratches on the inside that I didn't remove, I can always come back and take them out. You can never really tell until you've done both sides though, because you can't, it's really hard to tell the scratches from the inside and the outside. So you need to do your best you can to perfect one side, either side. So when you buff out the next side or sand the next side and then buff it out, you can tell which side the scratches are still on. There's no real easy way to do that. Okay, here we go. It's hard to believe someone can put so many scratches on the inside of the back window. But my experience, and I think this makes number 6 as far as windows go that I've sanded and buffed. Again, cleaning off the face. If you don't clean the dust off this, when you start moving on to new territory, it's clogging up the face of your disc, so it's not sanding very effectively. So you want to remove the dust off the surface you're sanding and then off the face of the disc before you start again. Okay. That looks good to me. I'm going to switch over to the 3000 and then keep on going. It's important to always center your sanding film disc so no part of that Velcro is going to be touching the plastic. Now this second step, look at all the, even 3000 is pulling a lot of plastic off there. But this is the most important part. Whether you're sanding car paint, aluminum or car paint or plastic, you need to refine whatever the previous grit is to the next grit. Otherwise, when you come to buff it out, the shallow scratches will buff out, but the deeper ones will remain, and then you got to fight them out or resand. So it's important that you cover every square inch each time you go to a higher grit level. Okay, I'm going to call that good. It looks good using overhead lights. And my experience is normally you do have a lot of swirls and scratches on the inside of the window, but they're not normally as deep. Like the outside of this window actually has some pretty bad scratches and some gouging down here across the bottom. So there's nothing my fingernail drops into. Okay, so let me grab my tools for polishing. I'll be right back. So now I'm ready to pull my sanding marks out. To do that, I'm using a wool pad because wools are a form of fiber and they're going to cut very fast. They're going to enable me to pull the sanding marks out effectively and quick. Now for abrasive technology, I'm using the Dr. Beasley's NSP 150. This is unique abrasive technology on the market. There's really nothing else like it. Besides the abrasive technology, we're going to be putting a ceramic coating on both sides of this, and this is completely inorganic. So there's nothing in this product that will affect the bonding of the coating to the plastic. With most coatings, you got to use a panel wipe. Not so with Dr. Beasley, so you skip that step. The cool thing about this product is the abrasives are spherical in shape, like perfectly round, and they have multiple facets around this sphere, so no matter where they're on the surface, they're always cutting. And this is really important because plastic shows micromarring very easily. So every step you need to be making the plastic more clear, not removing defects and leaving it micromarred. Okay, so just allow me to go ahead and buff this out. So the easy parts to buff are the big flat areas. The hard parts is when you start getting around where I've got this protective masking tape. So at some point, you actually need to take the tips or the edges of your pad and just kind of shove it up in there with some products. So you have the abrasive technology, the fibers spinning against that, pulling those scratches out. Okay, looking good. One thing I like about working on plexiglass is it's a very soft material. It actually cuts fairly easily, unlike some very hard clear coats or hard gel coats. Just one little section here. Okay, I'm going to call that good. And next step, I'm going to move over to using the Beast, a gear-driven orbital polisher with a foam cutting pad and NSP 95 to clarify those results. Then we're going to flip it over, do the other side. So here's a little technique tip. After I turned the camera off and came down here and started looking at my results a little closer, into these tight areas of the corners, I still had some sanding marks. I was able to get the 6-inch sanding disc in there, but I was having a hard time getting this. This is actually a 7.5-inch wool pad all the way into those corners. So I just wanted to share this with you. So if you're ever tackling something like this, you have a method to actually get into those corners. And what I've done is I've put on this is a 3.5-inch microfiber or micro wool disc on a 3-inch backing plate. And now I can get right into those corners. I just want to make sure that 100% of the sanding marks are removed before I go into the next step, because foam pad polishing with an orbital ain't going to take these scratches out. Okay, confidence high that I got that. Now I'm going to move on to the next step. Okay, for the same reason I switched to a 3.5-inch micro wool or fiber pad to get into the corners, I'm actually going with a foam cutting pad on a rotary to kind of go into those corners and all along the edges there, because I'm going to switch over to a 8mm gear-driven tool, and it's just a little harder to really get next to an edge. One way you could avoid this is don't stand up that far, but here my aim is for perfection, so I sanded right up to the tape line that I put around the car. But anyway, that would look something kind of like this. And with this 3.5-inch foam cutting pad, which is from Lake Country, using the NSP 150, I am able to get right up next to that edge. And here's what that does for me. By switching over to a foam pad with a uniform texture, I'm able to remove the hologram scratches caused by the wool fibers of a spinning wool pad against the plexiglass surface. Now I'm going to come back and refine it even further with an orbital tool, but it is important, to just understand that anytime you're using a wool pad on a rotary buffer or a micro wool, the fibers themselves are putting that hologram scratch in. We want to work that 100% out. Before I move on to the next step, I want to bring the camera down here and just show you the difference. Now the plexiglass is very clear, but now you can clearly see the scratches that are on the other side. I know everybody hates to assume, but let's just go ahead and assume by doing 2 sanding steps, a very thorough wool pad rotary step using a 3-inch and a 7.5-inch pad, that I have removed, hopefully, fingers crossed, all the scratches, the swirls, defects on the inside of this, So now when I do get to the point where I flip this thing over and polish out the scratches you see here, those are on the outside, then we'll have a perfectly clear finish. But I did want to kind of show you that working on things that are clear, so glass and plexiglass like this, it can be very confusing because you got to make sure you get the scratches off one side and the other side, and sometimes it takes a four-step approach. One time on this side, one time on their side, come back and get anything you miss on this side, go back and get anything you miss on their side. It's because you got to be able to see through it to get it perfect. So the next step is to completely remove any holograms over the entire window, except for maybe the edges there, using a foam pad. And I'm going to go back to the Dr. Beasley's NSP 150 just to make sure I got them 100% out. This is what I consider a light foam cutting pad from Lake Country. And one of the reasons foam is able to remove holograms is because there's no individual fibers. It has a uniform surface. That's part of the magic behind that, how that works. Okay, so again, back to the Dr. Beasley's NSP 150. 3 nickel-sized drops because this is a dry pad, then I'll cut my product usage down. And now I'm just going to go ahead and bump this up to the 6, do a little bit of hard polishing. So that was, a lot of people would ask me, how hard were you pressing down? I was probably pressing down on the head of this tool probably 10 to 15 pounds of pressure. So I'm engaging that abrasive technology with the plexiglass, with the foam pad, the rotating and oscillating action of the tool to work out, to smooth over that surface to make it like glass again. So that's the first polishing. The first step there with the wool pad, that's the cutting step. This was the first polishing step. And again, not so much that I'm a perfectionist, but for the person that owns this car, you know, their expectations are a piece of glass. And I'm not going to let them down. So I'm going to go ahead and repolish this now with a less aggressive pad and NSP 95. Okay, same tool, 8mm gear-driven orbital foam polishing pad. Always center your pad up on your backing plate as precise as you can get it. This is the Dr. Beasley's NSP 95. And this looks good to me, but you know what? When you're working on anything clear, it's kind of like black paint. You got to nail it. You got to get it perfect, or it will show up. The swirls and scratches. Okay, but the good news is this step goes a lot faster because now I'm really just refining the results from the previous step. to me, this is ready to flip over. Now, there's gonna be one more polishing step that I would do to this to get to perfection. This probably looks perfect, but that would be switching over to a random orbital polisher. So the Beast, that tool I was using there, called the Beast, that is not random, that is gear driven, has a fixed orbit. And a lot of times, my experience over the last 30 years has been that anytime you're working on a soft substrate, so like this plexiglass, a soft surface, a free spinning random orbital polisher, like the tool I sanded with, it will finish out nicer than a gear driven on soft material. So I'm going to switch over to this super soft black foam finishing pad, center that up, and then I will repolish using the NSP 45. But I don't want to do that till I make sure, after I've buffed out the other side, that I didn't leave anything behind. So if I have to come back and do some cleanup, there's be a waste of time to do 45 at this moment. So now it's time to flip this over and repeat the whole process to the other side.